China is building something unbelievable in these countries. The West cut them off, slapped on sanctions, and moved on like they'd already collapsed. China saw the gap and filled it with billions of dollars, and almost nobody's covering what's happened since. Iran now runs its own version of Amazon, builds Chinese-designed cars on home soil, and ranks as the world's 13th largest car manufacturer, sanctions and all. Afghanistan is sitting on $1 trillion in untapped minerals that China is racing to mine, while carving a 177-mile canal almost entirely alone. Zimbabwe became one of China's top lithium suppliers. China's reward? A brand new parliament building. Let's start with the country everyone wrote off for dead. How China helped Iran stay online. For years, Iran has been treated like a country cut off from the modern world. Sanctions hit its banks, restrictions hit its trade, foreign companies pulled back, global platforms became harder to reach. From the outside, it sounds like a place where modern life should have slowed to a crawl. But walk through Tehran and the picture is very different. There is traffic everywhere. Delivery riders move through busy streets. People walk into phone shops. Warehouses pack orders. While the outside world tried to squeeze Iran, a parallel digital world kept growing inside. The first layer is the mobile network. This is the hidden system behind calls, mobile data, banking apps, ride-hailing, delivery services, maps, and online shopping. That is where Chinese companies became part of the story. Huawei and ZTE have both been linked to Iran's telecom world over the years, from network equipment to systems tied to internet control and monitoring. ZTE's past dealings in Iran even became the subject of major investigations after reports that it had supplied equipment that could help monitor phone and internet communications. The same tools that keep people connected can also help a government watch, filter, and control what people do online. But for ordinary people, the most visible part is much simpler. It is the phone in their hand. Iranian consumers use a mix of common global phones and Chinese brands. Chinese devices became especially important because they were available, affordable, and easier to bring into a market where many Western-linked options were harder to access. Local Iranian phone brands also exist, but many still depend on imported parts and outside supply chains. Then comes the part that feels almost impossible from the outside. Iran built its own online shopping giant. Digicala started in Tehran in 2006, founded by brothers Hamid and Saeed Mohammadi. At first, it focused on electronics. Over time, it grew into a huge online marketplace where people could buy phones, laptops, groceries, personal products, sports goods, entertainment items, and digital products. In a country where Amazon could not simply walk in and take over, Digicala became something much bigger than a shopping site. And it did not stop with shopping. For apps, Iran had Cafe Bazaar. It was founded in 2011 as an Android app store made for Persian-speaking users. It became one of the country's most important app platforms, especially when normal access to global app stores became difficult or unreliable. Even Apple users found workarounds. By 2026, researchers were describing a wider underground world of Iranian iPhone app stores. These platforms grew because sanctions and censorship made normal access to Apple services difficult for many users. Then there is Snap, the ride-hailing platform that launched in 2014. It gave people a local way to book rides from their phones. That is the first layer of China's influence in Iran. But Iran's digital survival was only the surface. Once you move from phones to factories, railways, and oil, China's role becomes much harder to ignore. China's deeper move into Iran. At first, Iran's car industry does not fit the image many people have of the country. A place under heavy sanctions should not be producing cars on a serious scale. It should not have giant local automakers, deep supply chains, or factories turning out vehicles year after year. But Iran does. The country has one of the biggest auto industries in the Middle East. Its vehicle production has passed 1 million units in several years, even under pressure that would have crushed a weaker industrial base. The two names that dominate the story are Iran Khodro and Saipa, the giant local automakers that helped make cars part of Iran's industrial identity. A car industry is not just cars, it is steel, parts, engines, tires, glass, wiring, mechanics, repair shops, factory workers, dealers, and thousands of smaller businesses feeding into one machine. That is why Iran's roads tell a more complicated story. Sanctions hurt. Foreign companies pulled back. Western automakers became more careful, but the space did not stay empty for long. As Western car companies pulled back, Chinese automakers found an opening. They did not always enter Iran by simply shipping fully built cars into the country. They entered in a deeper way, through local production, assembly deals, parts, designs, and factory relationships. Chery became one of the clearest examples. Its cars reached Iranian buyers through local production and assembly links, including the company known for selling vehicles under the MVM name. Farda Motors followed a similar path with products linked to Dongfeng. After earlier foreign partnerships faded, it began assembling models connected to Dongfeng's Forthing line. That is the important part. China was not just selling cars to Iran from far away. Chinese brands were becoming part of Iran's car-making system. When a country only imports a finished car, the relationship can disappear quickly. But when local factories assemble the cars, workers learn the systems, spare parts are stocked, repair shops understand the models, and customers buy them across the market, the connection becomes much harder to remove. Then the relationship moved beyond factories. On March 27, 2021, China and Iran signed a 25-year cooperation agreement in Tehran. The details were not all made public, but the message was clear enough: energy, infrastructure, trade, long-term cooperation. This was a sign that Iran's future was leaning further east. And for China, Iran is not just another country on the map. It sits in a position that makes it impossible to ignore. Iran touches the Persian Gulf. It sits near Central Asia. It connects the Middle East to routes that can stretch toward Europe. It stands between some of the world's most important energy lanes and some of the land routes China wants to strengthen. That is where rail becomes important. Ships still carry most of the world's trade, but they have problems. They depend on ports, sea lanes, choke points, naval power, and long routes that can be blocked or delayed. China knows this better than almost anyone, so it has spent years looking for other ways to move goods across the world. Iran gives China one of those options. A container can leave inland China, cross Central Asia, and arrive near Tehran without waiting for the long sea route. In 2025, a direct freight train from Xi'an reached the Apron dry port near Tehran, showing how goods could move from China to Iran in about 15 days. By sea, that same kind of journey can take around 30 to 40 days. And then comes the real prize. Iran has oil, and China needs oil. For years, sanctions made it harder for Iran to sell crude openly to many traditional buyers. But the oil did not simply vanish. It kept moving through harder, quieter, more complicated channels. Smaller independent Chinese refiners continued buying Iranian crude, often through middlemen and payment routes built to work around pressure. Iran gets a buyer when many others hesitate. China gets cheaper crude and more leverage, so China did not have to rescue Iran. It only had to remain useful when others stepped away. But the next country was different. Iran still had oil, factories, and a strong industrial base. Afghanistan came out of 20 years of war, and on the surface it looked like the world had left nothing behind. But underground, it was a completely different story. China's dangerous bet in Afghanistan. After the Taliban returned to power in 2021, Afghanistan was treated like a warning sign. Many governments refused to formally recognize the new rulers. Foreign money slowed, aid was squeezed. The economy fell under deep pressure. Investors looked at the country and saw danger, weak rules, armed groups, and a future too risky to touch. China looked at the same country and saw something else. It saw a place that had been abandoned by many of the same powers that had fought over it for years. It saw a government desperate for money, trade, and recognition. It saw a country sitting beside some of China's most sensitive borders and routes. And most of all, it saw what was hidden under the ground. China did not wait for Afghanistan to become normal. It moved closer while the country was still isolated. Beijing accepted a Taliban-appointed ambassador, even while stopping short of full formal recognition. It also moved to give Afghan goods tariff-free access to Chinese markets, opening a door that many others kept closed. China was treating Afghanistan like a long game. For years, Afghanistan has been sitting on huge mineral wealth, often estimated at around $1 trillion. But that number only matters if the resources can actually be reached, mined, transported, and sold. Under its mountains and dry valleys are deposits of copper, iron, gemstones, possible lithium, rare earth elements, oil, and gas. Copper carries electricity, iron builds industry, lithium matters for batteries. Rare earths help make magnets, electronics, weapon systems, and clean energy technology. And the place that captures this better than anywhere else is Mes Aynak. Mes Aynak lies in Logar province, southeast of Kabul. On one level, it is one of Afghanistan's biggest copper deposits. On another level, it is one of the country's most important ancient sites. The same ground that holds the copper also holds Buddhist monasteries, stupas, statues, homes, and traces of a world that existed long before modern Afghanistan. The copper is under the ground. The ancient history is above it. To reach one, Afghanistan risks damaging the other. China moved early. In 2007, a 30-year copper lease was granted to China Metallurgical Group in a deal widely valued at about $3 billion. At the time, it was one of the biggest foreign investments Afghanistan had ever seen. For a poor country desperate for income, the promise was huge. Jobs, roads, revenue, a mine that could finally turn buried metal into national money. But the mine did not simply come alive. For years, Mes Aynak became a symbol of Afghanistan's bigger problem. The country had the resource, but not the easy path to use it. Security was weak, roads were limited, power was not reliable, contracts were disputed, archaeologists warned about what could be lost. The project needed far more than a hole in the ground, so China waited. Then, in July 2024, the project was publicly relaunched with road construction toward the mine. And copper is not the only thing pulling China toward Afghanistan. In the north, there is the Amu Darya Basin, where oil and gas have also drawn Chinese interest. For Afghanistan, even a small oil project can be huge. In January 2023, Xinjiang Central Asia Petroleum and Gas Company signed a major extraction deal with the Taliban-run government for the Amu Darya Basin. It was one of the first big resource deals announced after the Taliban returned to power. The deal promised investment, money for Afghanistan, and thousands of possible jobs. Afghanistan's oil may not power China the way Iran's does, but it gives China another reason to stay close. And staying close comes with danger. Chinese-linked activity in Afghanistan comes with serious risk. Foreign workers and mining projects can still become targets. In 2025, a Chinese national working with a mining company was killed in northeastern Afghanistan. Later, a deadly attack hit a Chinese-run restaurant in Kabul, killing a Chinese national and several Afghans. These attacks showed how dangerous the environment still is for Chinese workers, Chinese money, and Chinese-backed projects in the country. But to China, the prize may be worth the danger. The buried wealth is useless if a country cannot reach it. So China's next interest is not only what sits under Afghanistan, it is how Afghanistan could be connected to the outside world. China and Afghanistan's road to the world. Afghanistan sits in a rough, landlocked part of Asia, surrounded by mountains, borders, old rivalries, and hard terrain. Moving anything through Afghanistan is difficult. Moving heavy resources through it is even harder. But the same geography that makes Afghanistan hard to reach also makes it valuable. If the right roads and trade routes are built, Afghanistan stops being only a country people pass around in war rooms. It becomes a bridge. The most striking example is the Wakhan Corridor. On a map, it looks almost strange. A thin strip of Afghan land stretches out from the northeast like a long arm reaching toward China. It is narrow, remote, and surrounded by some of the harshest terrain in the region. For anyone looking at a map, the idea is tempting. Afghanistan touches China. China touches Afghanistan. Why not turn that into a direct route? But maps lie when they make mountains look simple. On the ground, the Wakhan Corridor is not a smooth trade highway. It is rough land, high passes, border pressure, security worries, and political risk. The area has been isolated for generations. Roads have improved in places, but the route is still difficult. And China has always been cautious about opening anything that could bring instability close to Xinjiang. Still, even the idea of that route shows why Afghanistan matters. A country that seemed trapped could one day become part of a wider land network linking Central Asia, China, and the Middle East. That is why Beijing has pushed for deeper ties. China has shown interest in Afghan mining cooperation and has wanted Kabul to formally join the Belt and Road Initiative. That is China's global web of roads, railways, ports, pipelines, trade routes, and influence. Afghanistan wants connection. China wants access. Both sides know roads are never just roads. And not every connection begins with copper, oil, or billion-dollar deals. Some begin with pine nuts. Afghanistan has exported tens of millions of dollars worth of goods to China, and in one recent year, most of that trade was made up of shelled pine nuts. Beside copper mines and oil fields, that sounds small. But for Afghan farmers, traders, packers, and exporters, it is money that moves right now. A mine may take years. A road may take years. A canal may take years. But agricultural exports can build trust faster. They put Afghan goods in Chinese markets while the bigger projects are still buried under dust, risk, and delay. Then comes the project that changes the whole feeling of the story, because this one is not mainly about China. It is about Afghanistan trying to reshape itself. In the north, Afghanistan is building the Kosh-Tepe Canal. It is planned to run about 177 miles, pulling water from the Amu Darya and carrying it through dry land that the government wants to turn into farmland. This is a desert-changing project. Work began in 2022, and the scale is massive for a country under this much pressure. For Afghanistan, that is not just development. It is survival. A country that has struggled with hunger, drought, poverty, and weak farming wants to turn dry land into productive land. It wants food. It wants jobs. It wants control over its own future. But the canal also carries a dark warning. The Amu Darya does not belong to Afghanistan alone. It flows through a region where water is already a source of fear. Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan depend on the same river system. Farmers downstream worry that if Afghanistan takes too much water, their fields could suffer. And this river already has a painful history. For decades, heavy water diversion helped destroy the Aral Sea, turning one of the world's great lakes into an environmental disaster. So when Afghanistan starts carving a huge canal from the Amu Darya, its neighbors do not see only progress, they see danger. For China, Afghanistan is still a long game. But in Zimbabwe, China found something much faster. A mineral already being mined, already being shipped, and already feeding the battery economy. China and Zimbabwe's lithium boom. The phone in your hand, the laptop on your desk, and electric cars all point back to one metal: lithium. And in Africa, one of China's most important sources is Zimbabwe. For years, Zimbabwe was treated like a difficult place to invest in. The country faced economic pressure, sanctions, debt problems, weak infrastructure, power shortages, and investor caution. Many outside companies saw risk. They saw a country where money could get stuck, projects could slow down, and politics could make everything harder. But Chinese mining firms saw something else. They saw a country sitting on metal that the battery world badly needed. Lithium is one of the key materials used in rechargeable batteries. It helps power phones, laptops, electric vehicles, and the giant batteries now being built to store electricity for power grids. It is not the only material that matters, but it is one of the names at the center of the new energy race. And China understands this better than almost anyone. China is not powerful in this race only because it buys minerals. It is powerful because it controls major parts of what happens after those minerals leave the ground. Mining is only the beginning. The real power sits in the middle of the chain, where raw minerals are processed, refined, and turned into the materials battery makers can actually use. That is why Zimbabwe suddenly mattered. Zimbabwe is now Africa's top lithium producer. The mineral is already being mined, packed, exported, and pulled into the global battery supply chain. In 2025, Zimbabwe exported about 1.24 million U.S. tons of lithium-bearing spodumene A concentrate to China. The year before, it exported about 1.12 million U.S. tons. That means the flow was growing, even while the global lithium market was under pressure. Spodumene sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. It is the rock that carries the lithium. Zimbabwe mines it, crushes it, and sends out the concentrate. But that is still not the final battery material. It still has to be processed before it can become something useful inside a battery. And that is where China's advantage becomes clear. China had the machine waiting to turn that rock into power. Chinese companies moved quickly. Zhejiang Huayu Cobalt became one of the biggest names in the rush after buying the Arcadia lithium mine for $422 million. That mine became one of the clearest signs that China was not just testing the waters. It was planting itself deep inside Zimbabwe's lithium future. Huayu did not stop at buying the mine. It built a major concentrator and then completed a $400 million lithium sulfate plant at Arcadia. That plant matters because lithium sulfate is a step closer to battery-grade material than raw concentrate. Sinomine is another major player. It owns the Bikita mine, one of Zimbabwe's best-known lithium operations, and announced plans for a $500 million lithium sulfate plant there. Chengxin Lithium Group, Yahua, and Tsingshan have also been part of the wider Chinese push into Zimbabwe's lithium sector. But there is a problem hidden inside the boom. Zimbabwe shipped more spodumene in 2025, but the money did not rise the way people might expect. Export revenue was about $513.8 million, slightly lower than the year before, even though the country shipped more material. That is the trap of raw mineral exports. If you only sell the rock, global prices can crush your reward. You can dig more, move more, ship more, and still make less than you expected. That is why this story is bigger than lithium. The real power is in what happens after the rock leaves the ground. Who processes it, who powers the factories, who builds the roads, and who becomes too deeply involved to remove. China's deeper hold on Zimbabwe. For years, Zimbabwe watched its minerals leave the ground, leave the border, and become more valuable somewhere else. So Zimbabwe started pushing back. The government has been pressing miners to process more lithium inside the country instead of simply digging it up and sending it away. In February 2026, Zimbabwe suspended exports of raw minerals and lithium concentrates, saying it wanted to stop leakages, tighten control, and force more value to stay at home. Zimbabwe wants to move from selling the rock to selling something closer to the battery. But none of this works without electricity. A processing plant cannot turn raw concentrate into something more valuable if the lights keep going out. Zimbabwe has struggled with power shortages for years. Demand has often been far higher than what the country could reliably produce. The old units at Hwange have suffered from breakdowns, while Kariba, the great hydropower station on the Zambezi, has been hit by drought and low water levels. A lithium mine without electricity is just a hole in the ground. That is why China's role in Zimbabwe's power system matters so much. Kariba South added 300 megawatts through an expansion built by Sinohydro with Chinese financing involved. Hwanga also added 2 new units of 300 megawatts each, bringing 600 megawatts of extra capacity in 2023. Once China helps build the electricity behind the minerals, it is no longer just a buyer. It becomes part of the country's industrial nervous system. And then come the roads and railways. Zimbabwe needs better transport to move minerals from mines to processing plants, from plants to borders, and from borders to ports. Chinese mining firms need the same thing. That is why Zimbabwe has been talking with China about using its mineral wealth to help finance roads and rail projects. The idea is simple. Future income from natural resources can help pay for infrastructure loans. The mineral helps fund the road helps move the mineral, and China sits close to both. By the time the entire system is built, China is not standing outside Zimbabwe's economy. It is woven through it. Then there is the part everyone can see. Zimbabwe's new parliament building stands at Mount Hampton, outside Harare. It was built by Shanghai Construction Group and funded as a Chinese government grant. Different reports have valued the project around $140 million to $200 million. A mine is economic influence. A power plant is industrial influence. A parliament building is symbolic influence. When the building where laws are made is a gift from another country, nobody has to explain the message. Still, Zimbabwe is not just standing there while other countries shape its future. The country is also trying to build its own infrastructure story. The Mbutsi interchange in Harare, the Harare-Bite Bridge highway upgrades, and the long-running Gwai-Shangani Dam project all show a government trying to fix roads, water, and movement inside the country. Some projects move fast, some drag for years, some face money problems. But the direction is clear. Zimbabwe is trying to use minerals, partners, roads, energy, and processing to reposition itself. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.